Hey guys, welcome back to the WODdoc Project365, episode 14. I can't believe it's been 2 weeks already. Here I am in front of the Wall of Dreams here at our local CrossFit. Talking about some anterior hip complex, and I collectively refer to the anterior hip complex as a couple different muscles, and we're going to be going over some mobilizations, some rolling with it, and some ischemic compression, static compression, and talking a little bit about that. You know, we've been spending so much time on the posterior hip complex, we kind of been neglecting the anterior stuff. I had a patient or an athlete this morning having a little pinch during some rowing and some squatting techniques, so we're going to cover that today. First thing we like to do is we like to start to roll, and prior to rolling I want to go over just a little bit quick anatomy for you. I'm not going to make you guys scientists, but I think it's important that you know to a certain extent what you're trying to accomplish. We're going to talk specifically about this region right here, and the way we're going to identify that is we're going to call this your hip crest, okay? Not your iliac crest, but your hip crest, and we're going to call this your hip bone, all right? That's kind of like where your femur jumps into your acetabulum there, allows your hip to bend over that. That's a portion that we're going to work through. And we're going to start kind of back here where your glute is, the posterior fibers, your glute med, towards the anterior fibers, your glute med, and there's another muscle here called your tensor fasciae lata, and then it kind of goes to that quad complex with a little bit of this muscle called sartorius in there. So we're going to kind of focus right here, okay? And the way that I'm going to show you on this side, but I'm going to perform it on this side so you can kind of see it. The way that we're going to start here is we're going to start right on that hip bone that I first talked about, and we're going to use the roller to transverse up to the hip crest, and we're going to go back and forth, hip bone, hip crest, hip bone, hip crest. Okay, so I get here, and I start right on the hip bone. Bottom leg is going to be straight, rollers on the hip bone. I'm going to use the back leg to kind of support myself. I'm going to roll down until I hit down to the hip bone, or sorry, hip crest, up to the hip bone, hip crest, hip bone. Do about 30 passes or so, or accumulate about 2 minutes. Now once I do that, if I don't feel any hot spots there, what I can do is I'm going to step over with that back leg, and I'm going to turn my body down about 45 degrees. And now this is going to go from those posterior fibers, the glute med, to the anterior fibers, the glute med, and to the tensor fasciae lata. And if I continue to come around, that's where I'm going to get a little bit more of those quad tendons as well. And I could go ahead, I could spend some time here as well, you know, about 30 seconds to 2 minutes, get about 30, 40 passes in there. If I want to spend a little bit more time and be a little bit more specific, I could pull back my leg here, and it's going to stretch out that quad just a little bit more, put a little bit more pressure onto those quad tendons. Now, once I go ahead went ahead and made this a little bit more pliable using the foam roller, I can go on these a little bit more vicious devices here. We'll start out here with the lacrosse ball. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to go to my hip bone, I'm going to roll it up and then to the front, and you'll feel myself really get a little bit more specific onto that tensor fasciae lata. So I hit that hip bone, I roll forwards, and then a little bit inferior and superior. And you'll feel yourself bounce over a tendon, do some little circles. Generally what I say here, guys, is we find that initial hot spot, we call it a 10, and we roll over it, little tiny circles, clockwise, counterclockwise, a star pattern, until that 10 becomes a 5. Now, I take out this little spiny sucker here. This thing gets really vicious, gets a little gnarly. I just like to put this down, and it really allows me to focalize on a specific point. And what I generally do here is just do ischemic compression with this thing. So again, we're going to start on our hip bone, move up a little bit farther, superior to where our hip crest is, and now my body's gonna turn over, and I'll find that little hot spot in that anterior hip complex, and I'm just gonna find it and settle on it and lean on it. Allow that thing to compress and work itself out. So again, same rules kind of apply with this. I find that initial hot spot, it doesn't have to be a 10, but I'm gonna call it a 10 because really I'm making it relative. So that way I spend about 20 to 40 seconds on it until it cuts into a 5, and then I'm done, I move on to the next spot, okay? So guys, try that out. We got 3 different devices here: foam roller, lacrosse ball, and then this little porcupine thing for ischemic compression. See how those guys work. Get back on the rower if that's where it was. Get back to doing some wall balls if that's where it was. See if you still get that anterior pinch when you're going into the squat. And let me know how that goes for you guys. Until then, until tomorrow, we're optimizing function to optimize performance.